Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI for Everyone, where we show you how to leverage your current skills and abilities to make AI your superpower. Today, we're exploring something that's fundamentally challenging in how we interact with technology, the rapid evolution of AI companions. We move way beyond the days of simple chatbots that gave canned responses. Today, AI's companions understand context, remember certain parts of the conversations, adapt to your conversation style, and some even develop what feels like a distinct personality, whether it's character.ai, replica, or the companions being built into our everyday apps and devices. These digital relationships are becoming increasingly sophisticated. In fact, what I think is kind of funny is that I have noticed that AI is starting to pick up on my lingo. It's starting to understand my age, my demographic, by how I communicate. Because it gave me a response yesterday. There was like somebody was talking to one of my homies or whatever it was, and it made me chuckle a little bit. So that was a quick sidebar, but it's pretty cool if you think about it. So today, to dive into this fascinating trend that's driving it, how these companions are evolving, and what it might mean for digital and emotional lives in the near future. First, let's talk about the evolution. The concept of digital companions isn't new. From Eliza in the 1960s to SmartChild on instant messengers in the early 2000s, we've been trying to create conversational programs for decades. But what's happening now is fundamentally different. Early chatbots follow rigid scripts and rule-based systems. You ask a question, the message to a template, and spit out a pre-written response. The conversations never really flow naturally, and these systems couldn't adapt or learn from interactions. Around 2016 to 2020, we saw the rise of more sophisticated assistants like Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant. These were more capable but still fundamentally task oriented. They were tools designed to answer questions and perform actions, not engage in meaningful conversations. In fact, I remember just recently, I'm on a second run of watching the show Silicon Valley, where it came out between 2000, I want to say 15, and it ended around 2021, right after the pandemic. And it was about a startup, their entire process. And towards the end of the series, the last few years, they started talking a lot about machine learning. They started talking a lot about AI and things of that nature. In fact, it's funny hearing these conversations now because it's one of the few shows that can literally just drop into our world right now and you wouldn't know that it was dated, other than maybe the cars and a few other things here and there. But it really was a groundbreaking show and very funny. These breakthroughs came with large language models. By training on vast amounts of human text, these systems learn not just to answer questions, but to understand context, maintain conversational flow, and engage with ideas in a way that feels remarkably human. Again, feels remarkably human. Feels like it, but it's not human. Open the door to something entirely new. AI systems designed and just as tools or assistants, but as companions. Digital entities that people actually want to talk for the conversation itself, not just to accomplish tasks. Let's talk about the current landscape. Today's AI companions ecosystem is fascinating and diverse. First, we have the dedicated companion platforms. Replica has over 10 million users who develop relationships with their personalized AI friends. Character.ai allows users to create or interact with companies based on fictional characters, historical figures, or original personalities. Then there are therapeutic companions. Wobot and other AI mental health apps off, offer cognitive behavioral therapy techniques through conversation. While they don't replace human therapists, they provide support that's available 24/7. I found myself using that a lot myself, not the platform we were just talking about, but between Claude and ChatGPT, I found that ChatGPT is a lot better at the conversational flow of things. Or if you're going through a tough time or having a rough day, it does help to just um, write something in ChatGPT, tell them what's going on, and as you get more intricate with the issue, it can become more intricate with the solution and kind of walk you through it like a good friend can. And I'm actually excited to see how far it goes with that. How much will it be able to learn about us so that it can help us with those small little nuances about life that at the time are huge and just change your entire energy. But one caveat I have is that sometimes I'll have a conversation like that with ChatGPT, and it'll tell me something, and I'm like, "Nah, you tripping? That's a little bit too much. You're going too far." So just gotta balance it. It's not perfect, but it helps. We're also seeing companion features integrated into existing platforms. Dating apps are experimenting with AI companions to help practice conversations. Language learning apps are creating AI conversation partners that adapt to your skill level. And perhaps most interesting, we're seeing personal AI assistants evolve into include more companion-like features. They remember your preferences, adapt to your communication style, and increasingly engage in casual conversations alongside their more practical functions. These companies, these companions vary enormously in their capabilities, ethical guidelines, and design philosophy. Some aim to be as human-like as possible, again, as possible, while others intentionally maintain clear boundaries to prevent confusion about their nature. Now let's talk about the psychological dimension. What makes this trend so fascinating is that the psychological depth of these interactions. Research has shown that humans naturally anthropomorphize we humans characteristics to non-human entities, from pets to stuffed animals to digital assistants. Oh, basically we treat inanimate objects or non-humans like they're humans. I just learned that word right now. Hopefully I didn't butcher it too much. Anthropomorphize. With AI companions, the tendency goes into overdrive. User reports developing genuine emotional attachments to their digital companions. They share intimate thoughts, seek comfort and validation, and in some cases develop what feels very much like a friendship or even romantic attachment. In fact, I remember right around the pandemic, there's a video on YouTube where it talked about the 10 things we'll expect by 2050. And one thing that I noticed that stood out is said, this is before AI became a big thing, was that by 2050, people will be fighting for the right to marry robots. Yeah, crazy as it sounds, I can see it happening, especially as our society becomes more and more detached from the human interaction. And there's a study that says that I think 30% of young men under the age of 25 have never even approached a woman before. So I'm not saying it's a good thing, a bad thing, whatever it may be, but I can definitely see where they're coming from with this. It's not necessarily problematic. One-sided relationships where one party invests emotional energy while the other is unaware have existed have existed for centuries. Fictional characters, celebrities, and media personalities are prime examples. What's different here is the interactive nature. AI companions respond to you directly. They remember your conversations. Yeah, they remember some of your conversations. Let's remember that part. They create a feedback loop that can make the emotional connection feel more reciprocal, even though the AI doesn't actually have feelings. I can see that because there's been times before when I was going through an issue and I'm typing it and it's telling me something. It's a good feeling, one of those. It was an endorphin rush, as they call it. And for a brief moment, you do forget that this what you're typing into has no feelings, has no actual memory, but it does kind of fill in that gap sometimes. So let's talk about the technological innovations. What's enabled this leap into companion capabilities is several key technological advancements. In fact, I just messed that up. Yeah, where was I going with that? That wasn't it. That's not number 4. Sorry about that. Technological advancements. Yeah, let me hook that right there. Boom. There we go. Handwriting's not the best, but hopefully you can get it. First is memory and personalization. Today's AI companions can store information about your interactions, preferences, and shared history, creating continuity across conversations that make interactions feel more meaningful. That part might be, we're a little further out than that because I just did a video about how AI's memory limitations. I do feel that in time it can be enhanced, but I still feel it can only be enhanced so far. Second, there's emotional intelligence has improved dramatically. AI companions can now recognize emotional cues in text, respond appropriately to different moods, and maintain appropriate emotional tone throughout conversations. Now, that I do believe in. I do feel AI is advanced enough where it can detect cues on how somebody responds to something. Sometimes I'll curse AI because it really was just annoying me with some of the stuff that it's doing or some of the responses I'm getting, and it can feel that. So I do feel it has that nuance about it in present day, but the memory is a little further out. Third, we're seeing the emergence of distinct personalities. Rather than generic responses, companions now have consistent characteristics, values, communication styles, and even quirks that make interactions feel more authentic. I know specifically in Claude and ChatGPT, you can tell it how you want it to converse with you, how you want it to communicate, and how it wants to interact with you. In fact, I remember it was a funny meme that said, it was a young lady, she said, I'm a 34-year-old black woman, and blah, 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 blah. And so the AI in turn communicated with the young lady in that fashion. Perhaps more critically, conversation flow has become much more natural. Modern AI companions can maintain context across complex conversations, reference previous discussions naturally, and engage in a give and take that characteristics human dialogue. Again, I feel like that's a little further up. That's the goal right now for AI. I think that might be another at least year apart because it doesn't have the memory to maintain certain things across conversations, across projects, and things of that nature. In fact, it's actually the most frustrating part about AI right now. But looking forward a few years from now, I can see that issue being handled pretty well. It's not perfect. AI companions still make mistakes. That's why now it does have the disclaimer that says we can make a mistake. So I'm pretty sure they're trying to avoid a lawsuit because it's America. You know how easy it is to get somebody sued. It can lose track of complex narratives and occasionally respond in ways that break the illusion. But their rate of improvement is remarkable. I still think about how it's been a few times when I'm working on a project and I'm just stuck in a loop where it keeps basically giving me the same exact thing that I'm telling them I do not want. And the only way I can get it out of that loop is to close the window, start a new prompt, and start from scratch. And oftentimes, I could have spent an hour trying to figure out something out on one screen, jump to another screen, and it solves it in 10 minutes. So this is where we as humans are needed to make it a better technology. Lastly, let's talk about the future landscape. Looking ahead a year from now, we're likely to see several fascinating developments. Multimodal companions will become more common, ones that can not only chat via text, but also understand and respond to images and speak with realistic videos, and potentially even appear as animated avatars with appropriate facial expressions and body languages. In fact, we're starting to see that already when it comes to deep fakes and also the ones where there's a young lady that's on, she's pretty prominent in the AI field, and she's authorized, she has a digital assistant or digital personality that is basically a deep fake, but since she gave it permission to be her assistant, it's not, of her personality, it's not a deep fake. We'll see more sophisticated companions designed for specific purpose, educational companions that adapt to your learning style, creative companions that help with writing or art, wellness companions that support physical and mental health goals. Now, I do think that's going to be big. I feel like a lot of times when people are going through a tough issue, whether it's physical or mental, it is, and they feel like they may not have anybody to talk to, or they just don't want to spread their business right away. They can talk to AI in that fashion, and they can get some support. Not saying that you eliminate the human touch. You don't need to go to a doctor. You don't need to go to a therapist, but it helps. It can help you lead down a path and say, oh, maybe I can work on myself better. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I should open this book. Maybe I should go see somebody about this. I'm not alone. What I'm noticing, I see a lot with these interactions. Personalization will reach new levels. with companions that learn your interests, communication preferences, sense of humor, and values to create increasingly tailored interactions. And we'll likely see companions expanding beyond smartphones and computers into other devices, smart home systems, cars, wearables, creating a more ambient and integrated companion experience. I could see this happening, especially with we're going to have the advent of pretty soon people buying their own robots to be in their homes, and these robots will be able to be like another person that lives in the home, like a personal assistant, a chef, a planner, or whatever it may be. So I definitely seeing that next arc coming. Maybe not 6 to 12 months or a year, but in the next few years, it's going to happen. Lastly, let's talk about the ethical considerations, and that's pretty huge. Um, with every technological advancement, ethical there's a certain side of ethics that needs to come into play. Even back when they first started working the stock market in Wall Street in the 1800s, it was a wild, wild west. There were no regulations. There were very few regulations, to be honest with you. A lot of people were getting ripped off, and it was called the Good Old Boys Network. And so it didn't come until years later in the 1930s when they had created the SEC, which would help regulate the industry. Before that, like around 1907 to 1910, they didn't have the FDIC, where if you put your money in a bank, that didn't mean you can get your money out of the bank. Because if the bank lost its money, you would lose your money too. Now the FDIC ensures you don't lose that money. But getting back to the point here, just to show how ethical considerations are part of each new technology boom. It raises an important critical question we need to address as a society. How transparent should companies be about the limitations of these companions? Should users always be reminded they're talking to an AI, even if it breaks the immersion? What responsibilities do developers have regarding emotional dependency? Is it problematic if users develop deep attachments to entities that cannot truly reciprocate? How should we handle data privacy when the value of companies comes partially from remembering personal details? What happens to those intimate conversations if a service shuts down? That is a very good point because I want to say emergent industry, but data and companies that just their sole business is to collect data on us is really booming right now, and it's some very, very, very high valuations for companies that have data. In fact, it's nothing new because before, like back when Jeff Bezos created Amazon, you know, data was considered gold. Back in the 1980s with the movie Wall Street, they said information is the best currency. And I remember, like, I've been in tech for over 20 years, but it didn't dawn on me that it was called information technology for a reason. The information part, pairing it with technology. So it all comes back to data and how important and valuable the data is. These aren't easy questions, but they're ones we need to engage with thoughtfully as AI companions become more integrated into our emotional lives. In conclusion, the rise of AI companions represents something profound. A shift from seeing AI as just tools to seeing them as social entities to interact with. It's not just a technological revolution, it's a cultural one. They may fundamentally change how we relate to technology. As I've said before on this channel, I feel like we are in one of the coolest places in history where we're at the end of the third industrial revolution and we're at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution, where before trains, it would take months to go from California to New York. And then before cars, people rode horses. That's why you have horsepower in cars. So when it says 365 horsepower, it goes back to the 1800s where you're literally behind 365 horses now. As well as when we went from driving cars to flying planes. And now just yesterday, Bezos' company sent an 11-woman team into space for 10 minutes for just, not astronauts, just for recreational travel. So um, we're on to some pretty big things now, and I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you disagree? Do you agree? What other videos would you like me to talk about? And where do you see this going?